as some of you might have already gone on our website, but we have
Did we just lose Supreet?
Yeah, she froze up for just a
Yep,
minute.
Okay, let's.
yep,
She's
I
back.
did.
Yep,
My laptop
She's
froze for a
back.
she's
second.
back.
Okay,
Yep.
continue.
Sorry about that. So this started as a simple demand for a freeze on rents, mortgage, and utilities, but we realized that this is a moment where we can come together and demand for a lot more. As some of you might know, the French Yellow Vest movement was actually started by a petition a petition to lower to petition against proposed fuel taxes, and that petition got 1 million signers in a couple of weeks, and from there on their demands increased, people got on the streets, and essentially within a couple of weeks they got the fuel taxes rolled back and put together much more comprehensive anti-austerity demands, and people rallied around that. So we have moment in our politics as well where there is a huge moment for working people who are like, okay, the system is not working against for us. Every time the market crashes, we lose everything, and the rich keep getting richer. So for that, we have made our demands more comprehensive, which would be updated on our website soon. But just to name a few of them, in addition to a freeze on rent, mortgages, and utilities, we have called for nationalization of healthcare delivery mechanisms, just like Spain did, because it allows you to respond in a much faster, more efficient way to the crisis, immediately provide free testing and treatment for everybody, have guarantee that I'm so sorry. Yeah, create a financial reconstruction committee, which will essentially enact a people's bailout instead of a corporate bailout, and no layoffs, no bailouts for any industry that is threatening layoffs. This and a full list of demands will also be emailed to you in a follow-up email, but we'll also update it on our website. Now, demands are good, but without a comprehensive strategy to meet those demands, we're not going to get anywhere. We believe that to get our demands passed, we need a national mass movement of people coming together on a broad set of goals, and not only think short term in how to help people through the crisis, but also long term in how to make sure that we never are in this position again. So that's where Rent Strike sees our role. Really, we know people are already ready to organize. All we are looking to provide is resources on how to go about organizing a rent strike. What is a rent strike? What are the potential consequences? And how will we take care of each other as we go through a rent strike? Just as a clarifying point, a rent strike is not just an inability to pay rent. A lot of people on the call, I know, will be struggling to pay their rent come April 1st. But if you are not able to pay rent because you don't have money, then you don't really have any leverage. A strike is when you or a mass of people withhold something they have, either their labor or their money, to get a few demands. So to get to that point, to have a rent strike, there is a lot of organization that everybody on this call will have to do with people in their building, other renters under your property management or landlords landlord's jurisdiction, under your landlord's properties, and you have to talk to them and get people who are willing to pay, able to pay, also withhold their rent. But it takes a lot of organizing, and that's what we are here to fill in the gaps for. And additionally, we are also looking to connect everybody who's going through a rough time with other mutual aid organizations. Like if there's people, we get a lot of emails from families, sometimes single parents who have kids and they are about to lose their home on April 1st. Unfortunately, we don't have the capacity right now to provide aid, but we will, and later in this call, we'll get your needs from you and we'll try and connect you with local and state mutual aid organizations, of which there are plenty, to help you through this rough time. And that's about it from me in our introduction. The next section was supposed to be by Rook, but he hasn't been able to join us yet. So I'm going to give the mic to
Supreet, Rob
Yeah.
is here. Rob is here.
Okay.
He wasn't able to join on the panelist Zoom call, but he is on
Is
uh,
on the
the
call.
live stream. So, is there any way you could let him in to speak?
Yeah, if he is,
Yeah, his name is not just Rob. What's he under?
His
I'm
full name is
lowering
Rob Rook.
low. Sorry, I just lowered all hands. Could Rob just raise your hand, please? Is I see him now. Allowed to talk and move to panelist. Just 1 second. Promote to panelist. Rob should be on soon. There you go. There's Rob. And I'll mute myself. Rob will be able to introduce himself and tell us a little bit about tenants organizing.
Okay. Hi, can you hear me?
Yep. Hi, Rob.
Okay. So my name's Rob Rook. I'm here in Oakland, California. I was active for about 10 years with the campaign for renters' rights that did direct action casework, fighting mostly against evictions. Can everybody hear me? Was active.
Yes.
Yes, we
With the
can.
campaign for renters' rights. I'm also a former executive board member with the Carpenters Union, and I was involved in the Wildcat strike of about 5,000 construction workers in 1999. So I wanted to talk for a few minutes about try to get a sort of a context from of where we're at. This is kind of where usually we start, is on the issue of it feels like we're in the biggest and most serious economic and health and political crisis that America has faced from the. Okay. Oh, I see. I'm sorry. My video started. How's that? Okay. Yeah. There you go. Good. I'm so sorry about that. I'm a little older than perhaps most people, and I'm a little bad at at some of the technology. So I think we're in a huge crisis right now in the country, and I think the need to try and draw on experience from the past is a very important. It's a very important moment to try and figure that out. In Oakland, we did a lot of rent organizing, but it was primarily around evictions. And what our experience was during the 2000s was that when people are faced with evictions, that is usually the best time to organize people. We're in a bit of a different environment right now, where we're in a situation where a lot of people are going to be faced with not being able to pay the rent on April 1st, and then also come May 1st, hopefully we'll be in a situation where we'll be able to get large numbers of people to organize around the rent strike 2020. So in terms of our approach in Oakland in fighting evictions, we started by kind of trying to get an international and a historical view of rent strikes. And this country is not, rent strikes are not unknown in this country. There were massive strikes, primarily of tenants in the 1930s around the evictions. Most of those evictions were situations where large numbers of people were, in fact, in New York, for instance, there was up to 200,000 people were evicted during the Depression. And the Communist Party and other organizations worked to attempt to help them get back into their homes. And it was in that environment that you had a lot of clashes with the police, and people were able to put people back in their homes. Also internationally, there's been some very good experiences with strikes. If we look at the Glasgow strike in 1915, I know that's going back a long way, but where women organized in a situation where there was rapidly rising rents, and where the women were able to organize a citywide strike in Glasgow, and where actually when those women were taken to court, the shipyard workers, who were their husbands and their sons and their brothers and so on, they actually went out on strike for a day and were able to help win that strike in 1915. Immediately following that, you had legislation passed because I think the ruling elite were really scared by that strike. And there was also a wave of strikes that took place through Britain at that time. Also in Barcelona in 1931, a similar situation where there was a citywide rent strike of about 100,000 people. More recently in Toronto, there was a couple of high-rise buildings that went on rent strike, again, against rent hikes. This is a bit of a new situation that we're facing coming up in April, tomorrow on April 1st, but also in on May 1st, where we'll have a situation where there will be literally millions of people across the country who will have the choice between whether to pay for food or whether they should put their money to the rent. And quite frankly, I think large numbers of people are going to say, we need to keep our rent. In Toronto, the campaign that's a kind of a sister campaign to ours, Keep Your Rent is the slogan that they're using up there. And they have organized a large Facebook group. And I think that's something that we need to consider, is to organize city by city Facebook groups where we try and bring hundreds of people and thousands of people onto those groups so that people can air their hesitations, try and figure out the way forward, and so they can come together and see the kind of numbers that are involved. Because I think people feel very atomized, at least in those states where we're on a scenario of a shelter in place like we are here in Oakland. So, so I think that that in the period ahead, the big clash will be, or the big struggle will be, on the one hand, there's two component parts really, and I was kind of begin to end on this. The one element is to get people to join the strike. That will be very important. The other side of it is to get people to organize in their communities, in their buildings. During the kshamavsawant campaign in November, and prior to that, we did a lot of deep organizing where we got people to meet their neighbors, know who their neighbors are, and to connect with their neighbors. And in this situation, we can do that through Zoom or we can do it by phone call, but we need to really try to organize from below as solidly as we can to defend those of us who are not able to pay rent come May 1st in particular. And so I think one of the things that we're fighting for is for people to self-organize and to prepare so that come May 1st, we're going to be in the strongest position possible. Just finally end on the one point about the organizing that we did in Oakland and our experience there was that people will fight when they have no choice but to fight. All of our campaigns in the 2000s were around, primarily around people whose back were up against the wall and for whom they were facing homelessness. In that scenario, people will fight. And I think our role in this panel tonight is to try to help figure out how to strengthen that resolve to fight, bring people together and give them the confidence that they need to be able to stand up to the landlord and to fight then for a common goal of getting the local governments, the state governments and the federal government to step in and say there shouldn't be any rent payments due on May 1st and for a freeze of rent payments.
Thank you, Rob. So I have been keeping a slight eye on all the comments just to answer a few frequently asked questions that are here. A lot of people I see asking if there's something in their state or city. Follow up from this call would be, we'll be organizing state by state and bringing in existing organizations if there are any that are currently organizing for a rent strike, but that's where we'll have state by state organizing. Right now, I want to just clarify what rent strike is about and what rent strike means and what our capacity is. So I can pass it off next to Lee Carter from Virginia, who has called for a rent freeze, rent, mortgage, and utilities freeze in Virginia. So he can talk a little bit about his demands, where they're at, and how people on the call in Virginia can get involved.
Yes, thank you so much. So I'm Lee Carter. I'm a member of the Virginia House of Delegates. It's the lower half of the Virginia State Legislature. I am the only socialist elected to state level office in Virginia, and I believe the only one in any Southern legislature. And I just want to talk a little bit about sort of the state's response and the inadequacies of the state's response here in Virginia and also elsewhere. So the state's response and the way that I've been approaching this crisis here in Virginia is thinking of it in three steps. So the first is biological safety, right? So we have obviously a situation where there is a virus that's potentially lethal that's out there, and so the very first thing that we have, the immediate concern that everyone needs to focus on is making sure that we are limiting infections as much as possible so that our healthcare system doesn't get overwhelmed. What we've seen in other places is the rate infections as much as possible so that our healthcare system doesn't get overwhelmed. And you have a huge spike in deaths, right? That's why you have some places with less than 1% death rate from this virus and other places with 9 or 10. So once the biological safety is taken care of, that's where you've got your shelter in place orders, your social distancing, sort of business closures to make sure that we're limiting people's exposure. Once that is in place, then the second step is to make sure that people's financial security is addressed during the duration of this crisis. And I want to make sure that everybody understands, we are not looking at this as a several week crisis. This is going to be months at a minimum. So Virginia actually starting yesterday went on a mandatory stay-at-home order. It is the longest in the country. It's set to expire on June 10th. And frankly, that is on the optimistic side. There are a lot of epidemiologists who have looked at this and said that we may be in a situation of rolling shutdowns where everybody locks down for a while, we get things under control, we open up a little bit, we lock back down, we open up a little bit, we lock back down until there's a vaccine or a treatment, which could be quite a long time. So people's financial security is going to be incredibly important in the weeks and months to come. To make sure that people actually can abide by the stay-at-home orders, because of course, most of the people that are going out now, it's not people going out to spring break. It's not people going to the park because they want to. It's people that are going and looking for work because they have bills that are due. And so this is where sort of the demands in Virginia are right now. We've just started to make these demands for things like a suspension of rent payments, mortgage payments, late fees, and evictions, and the reconnection of utility service for people that have had their utility service cut off already. And then the third step, once we've got that taken care of, is making sure that we rebuild an equitable economy, right? When this is over, we can't just go back to the conditions that we had before, because the conditions that we had before are what led us to a situation where we have massive layoffs. So we have massive amounts of people that are unable to pay the rent. We have, Congress passing a $2.2 trillion quote unquote aid package, the overwhelming majority of which goes to massive corporations on the promise that they won't lay people off. And of course, they're doing it anyway. So we need to make sure that over the long term, once this is said and done, we move to a situation where our economy is owned and operated by the workers, the people who are actually doing the work day to day. This can take a number of forms. I'm a proponent of worker cooperative ownership, but there are a lot of different ideas for how to do that. And when it comes to housing, because this is rent strike, we need to make sure that we have housing for use rather than housing for investment. Speculatory investors have been the number one driver of increased housing costs throughout the country. And it's the reason why here in Virginia, we currently have 11 empty houses for every homeless man, woman, and child. So we need to use this to make sure that we're fighting for a more just economy for the long run rather than just resetting. Now, I think it's important to think of this as a 3-step process because people really don't have the energy to think about next year when they're worried about whether they're not going to be able to make the rent next month. And so this is sort of the strategic. We need to make sure that our demands are focused first and foremost on that biological safety, and then after that on making sure that people can weather this crisis, and then after that on making sure that we come out of this with a more just, more equitable society. So that's sort of where my thinking is strategically on this. Now, every state, of course, has a different response. Every state is in a different different phase of this. But frankly, all states' responses have been completely inadequate on the second and third parts, right? So the financial security and on rebuilding a more just society. And this is where our power comes in. We act collectively. When those of us who can make the rent, withhold our rent until those demands are met, that's where we're actually going to be able to elicit that change. And historically speaking, this is really, really a moment where the ruling class is up against the ropes. And it's not because of anything that we've done. It's just because of the reality of biological safety. They built a very, very fragile economy that is now collapsing around us. And that is why collective action right now is going to be extremely effective. And like Rob was saying, we have a lot of people that are sort of up against the wall right now as workers, as tenants. And that's when people are most willing to fight. So we have this confluence of people that have to fight. We have